One moment of honesty at my wedding unraveled decades of lies and changed my family forever. Growing up, my sister Rachel and I were nothing alike. She's 4 years older, and from the moment our mom died when I was 8, our lives took completely different paths. Dad remarried within a year to Diane, a woman who made it crystal clear from day one that Rachel was her favorite. Not because Rachel was her biological daughter, neither of us were, but because Rachel was beautiful, charming, and knew exactly how to manipulate people to get what she wanted. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who always put family first, even when it meant sacrificing everything I wanted. When I was 16 and Rachel was 20, she got accepted to a prestigious private university. The tuition was astronomical, and even with financial aid, we couldn't afford it. I'd been saving money from my part-time job at a local diner for my own college fund, and I'd also just won a scholarship that would cover most of my state school expenses. Dad sat me down one evening with that look on his face, the one that meant he was about to ask me for something I didn't want to give. "Elena, honey, your sister really needs this opportunity," he said, his hands folded on the kitchen table. "You're so smart, you'll succeed anywhere. But Rachel, she needs the connections, the prestige. This could change her life." What he meant was, give up your scholarship money so Rachel can have everything. And like the dutiful daughter I'd always been, I said yes. I deferred my college acceptance, worked full-time at the diner, and watched every penny I'd saved go toward Rachel's dream school. She never once said thank you. 3 years later, when I finally had enough saved to start community college, Rachel announced she was getting married to Mark, a successful lawyer from a wealthy family. She needed a lavish engagement party, a designer dress for the bridal shower, and of course, I was expected to contribute. Dad pulled me aside again with that same expression. I gave up college a second time. By then, I'd stopped expecting gratitude. I'd stopped expecting anything at all. Rachel's wedding was everything mine would never be. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, champagne fountains, 200 guests in designer clothes. I wore a dress from Target and smiled through every moment, even when Rachel introduced me to her new in-laws as my little sister who works service jobs, with a pitying smile that made my skin crawl. That was Rachel. To her, I wasn't a sister. I was a supporting character in her perfect life story, and for years I accepted that role because I thought that's what family meant, sacrificing yourself so others could shine. But everyone has a breaking point. Mine came 7 years before my wedding day. Rachel had everything: a handsome husband, a beautiful home, and eventually a son named Jason. She posted constantly on social media about her perfect life, always making sure to include subtle digs at mine. "So grateful Mark provides for our family. Some people aren't as lucky." Or, "Just booked our 3rd vacation this year. Everyone deserves to treat themselves when they work hard." The implication was always clear. She'd succeeded, and I hadn't. What nobody knew, what I'd kept buried for 7 years, was that Rachel's perfect life was built on a foundation of lies, and those lies had destroyed me first. Jason, her adorable 5-year-old son with Mark's last name and Mark's trust fund, wasn't Mark's child at all. He was the son of Jake, my first love, the man I'd planned to build a life with until Rachel decided she wanted him too. I met Jake when I was 21, working double shifts at the diner to save money for school. He'd come in every morning for coffee before his construction job, and after 3 weeks of small talk, he asked me out. Jake wasn't wealthy or connected. He was a regular guy with calloused hands and an honest smile. But he saw me, not as Rachel's little sister or the family workhorse, just as Elena. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. We dated for 8 months. He met my family at Thanksgiving dinner, and Rachel was her charming self, asking him about his work, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm when she talked. I should have seen it then, but I was naive. I thought my sister actually cared about my happiness for once. 2 weeks later, Jake broke up with me over the phone. No explanation, no real reason. Just, "I don't think this is working out." I was devastated. I called Rachel crying, and she came over with wine and tissues and told me all the right things. "You deserve better. He wasn't worth it. You'll find someone amazing." 6 months passed. I was still heartbroken but trying to move on. Then I saw them together at a coffee shop downtown. Rachel and Jake holding hands across the table, her leaning in to kiss him while wearing her wedding ring. She was married to Mark. She had everything. And she'd taken Jake too. I confronted her the next day. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "Oh, Elena, don't be so dramatic," she said, examining her manicured nails. "Jake and I just have a connection. You wouldn't understand. You've never had anything real with anyone. Besides, I'm doing you a favor. He was never going to give you the life you deserve. He's barely making minimum wage." I asked if Mark knew. She laughed. "Of course not. Mark and I are solid. Jake is just fun. Something for me, you know. You always give everything away, so I figured you wouldn't mind if I borrowed something of yours for once." That's when she told me she was pregnant, and that Jake was the father. But Mark thought the baby was his, and that's how it was going to stay, because Mark's family has money and connections, and Jake has nothing. I should have told Mark then. I should have exposed her, but I was young and broken, and some terrible part of me still wanted my sister to love me, so I said nothing. I watched her play the doting wife while she met Jake in secret for months. I watched her give birth to Jason and accept Mark's tears of joy, knowing the man crying beside her bed wasn't the child's father. And then Jake vanished. Rachel got bored of him and discarded him like she did everything else. He left town, and I never heard from him again. For 7 years, I kept that secret. It sat in my chest like a stone, growing heavier every time I saw Mark dote on Jason, every time Rachel posted another perfect family photo online, every time she looked at me with that pitying smile that said I'd never have what she had. But secrets have a way of demanding to be told. And my wedding day was when the weight finally became too much to bear. I met David when I was 26. He was a software engineer, kind and steady, and completely different from anyone I'd ever known. He didn't care that I'd never finished college or that I worked as an administrative assistant. He loved me for who I was, not what I could give him. When he proposed after a year of dating, I cried for an hour straight, happy tears, the first I'd shed in years. Planning the wedding was supposed to be joyful, but my family turned it into another battleground. Diane immediately started comparing everything to Rachel's wedding. Rachel had orchids, not roses. Rachel's venue was much more elegant. Rachel's dress was custom. Are you really buying off the rack? The worst part was the guest list. I'd made one decision that was entirely mine. I wasn't inviting Rachel. After years of her condescension and cruelty, after watching her steal pieces of my life without remorse, I was done. This was my day, and I didn't want her there. Dad called me 2 weeks after I sent out save the dates. "Elena, we need to talk about your sister." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "She's not invited." "That's not how family works," he said, his voice taking on that disappointed tone I'd heard my entire life. "Rachel is your sister. She should be there. Diane is very upset." "I don't care if Diane is upset. This is my wedding, and I don't want Rachel there. She spent my whole life making me feel small. I'm not giving her another opportunity." We argued for 20 minutes. He used every manipulation tactic in the book: guilt, obligation. "What would your mother think?" I stood firm. When we hung up, I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 1 week before the wedding, my best friend Sarah pulled me aside during the rehearsal dinner. "Elena, I just saw your dad talking to someone in the parking lot. It looked like, is that your sister?" My blood went cold. I walked outside, and there she was, Rachel, climbing into her Mercedes, waving at Dad through the window like they'd just had a pleasant chat. When I confronted him, he had the audacity to look sheepish. "I sent her an invitation," he admitted. "She's your sister, Elena. She deserves to be there." "You had no right," I said, my hands shaking. "This is my wedding. Mine and David's, not yours." "Family is family," he said, his jaw set in that stubborn way that meant the conversation was over. "Rachel will be there, and you'll be gracious about it. That's final." I should have uninvited him right then. I should have hired security to keep Rachel out, but a lifetime of conditioning told me to keep the peace, make everyone else comfortable, swallow my own feelings for the sake of family harmony. So I said nothing. I went home and cried into David's shoulder while he held me and promised it would be okay. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Golden September sunshine, a light breeze, everything I dreamed about. I put on my dress, and for a moment, standing in front of the mirror with Sarah fixing my veil, I let myself believe it would actually be perfect. Then I walked into the venue and saw Rachel sitting in the second row, dressed in a cream-colored gown that was absolutely inappropriate for a guest. She looked like a second bride. She'd positioned herself front and center, impossible to miss, and when our eyes met, she smiled. Not a warm smile, a knowing smile. A smile that said she'd won again. The ceremony itself was beautiful. David's vows made me cry, and when we kissed as husband and wife, I felt genuinely happy for the first time in months. But all through the reception, I could feel Rachel's presence like a dark cloud. She was laughing too loudly, drawing attention, making sure everyone noticed her. I tried to ignore it. We cut the cake, had our first dance, and I was starting to relax when the best man finished his toast and Rachel stood up. She picked up a microphone that wasn't meant for her and my stomach dropped. "I know I wasn't supposed to speak," Rachel began, her voice carrying across the reception hall, "but I just have to say a few words about my baby sister." David grabbed my hand under the table. The room went quiet. "Elena and I have always been so different," Rachel continued, walking toward the head table with practiced grace. "Growing up, I always worried about her, you know? She was so plain, so ordinary, never quite measured up. While I was at university, Elena was working at a diner. While I was building my career, Elena was just, well, still working service jobs." A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the crowd. My face burned. "But I'm so proud that Elena finally found someone who wants her despite all that," Rachel said, gesturing toward David with the microphone. "David, you're a saint for seeing past the fact that Elena comes from humble circumstances. I mean, she worked as a waitress until she was 25. Can you imagine?" She said it like it was shameful, like my hard work was something to mock. "And Elena, sweetie, I just want you to know that it's okay you couldn't afford a wedding like mine. Not everyone can have the fairy tale, right? Some of us are just meant for smaller lives. But hey, you tried your best and that's what counts." She raised her champagne glass and a few people awkwardly joined her. Most of the room sat in stunned silence. Mark, her husband, looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. David's hand tightened on mine, and I could feel his anger radiating through his grip. Rachel sat down with a satisfied smile, clearly believing she'd delivered a touching tribute rather than a humiliating roast. That's when something inside me snapped. All those years of biting my tongue, of accepting her cruelty, of protecting her secrets, they evaporated in an instant. I stood up. David looked at me with concern, but I gently squeezed his hand. "Trust me," I whispered. I walked to where Rachel sat and calmly took the microphone from the table beside her. The room was utterly silent now, everyone sensing something had shifted. "Thank you, Rachel, for those interesting words," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Since you've decided to share your thoughts about my life, I think it's only fair I share some truths about yours." Rachel's smile faltered. "Elena, what are you—" "7 years ago, I was in love with someone named Jake," I said, addressing the room. "He was my first real boyfriend. I thought we had a future together. Then he broke up with me out of nowhere, and I was heartbroken. My sister Rachel came over to comfort me. She held me while I cried and told me I deserved better." I turned to look directly at Rachel. Her face had gone pale. What I didn't know then was that Rachel had been sleeping with Jake for weeks before he broke up with me. She was married to Mark at the time, of course, but that didn't stop her. "She took my boyfriend, had an affair with him, and 6 months later she was pregnant." Gasps erupted across the room. Mark stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that Jason isn't your son, Mark," I said, my voice ringing clear through the reception hall. "He's Jake's son. Rachel got pregnant during their affair, lied to you about it, and has been letting you raise another man's child for 5 years. "That's a lie!" Rachel shrieked, standing up. "Elena, you're insane! You're jealous and you're lying!" "Am I?" I reached into my clutch and pulled out an envelope I'd been carrying all night. I handed it to Mark. "This is a copy of the real DNA test Rachel had done when she was pregnant, the one she hid from you. She kept it in a box in her closet with old photos of Jake. I found it 6 months ago when I helped her move some furniture while you were out of town." Mark's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. I watched his face as he read the results, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to absolute devastation. The paper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. "Mark, please, let me explain." Rachel reached for him, but he jerked away from her touch like she'd burned him. "Don't," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't touch me." He looked at Jason, his 5-year-old son, except not his son, playing at the kids' table, oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated his family. Mark's face crumpled, and without another word, he walked across the room, picked up Jason, and carried him toward the exit. Several of Mark's family members stood and followed, shooting disgusted looks at Rachel. Rachel stood frozen in the middle of the reception hall, mascara starting to run down her face as the reality of what just happened crashed over her. Guests were murmuring, pulling out phones, already texting and calling with the gossip. "You ruined my life," she whispered, staring at me with pure hatred. "No," I said quietly. "I told the truth. You ruined your own life the moment you decided my feelings didn't matter, that Mark's feelings didn't matter, that nothing mattered except what you wanted." Rachel tried to speak again, but Dad was suddenly there, pulling her toward the door as she dissolved into sobs. Diane glared at me like I was a monster, but several guests actually started applauding. Sarah came up and hugged me, whispering, "I'm so proud of you," in my ear. David wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years when it came to my family. Free. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Rachel called me 47 times. I blocked her after the 15th call. She sent text messages begging me to help her explain to Mark, to tell him I'd lied, to fix what I'd broken. I blocked those too. Because I hadn't broken anything. I'd simply stopped holding together something that was already shattered. Mark hired the best divorce attorney in the state. Within days, he'd filed papers citing fraud and deception. His lawyers were going after Rachel for everything: the house he'd paid for, the money he'd spent raising Jason, 7 years of lies. His family's connections made sure the case moved faster than anyone expected. The custody battle was even worse. Mark didn't want Jason anymore, couldn't even look at the child without seeing Rachel's betrayal. He'd spent 5 years believing Jason was his son, and discovering the truth broke something fundamental in him. He petitioned to remove his name from Jason's birth certificate to be released from all financial obligations. Jake, Jason's biological father, was nowhere to be found. We'd all searched, private investigators, social media, everything. He'd disappeared years ago, and there was no trail to follow. That left Rachel completely alone with a 5-year-old child she hadn't expected to raise by herself. But the legal devastation was only the beginning. The social destruction that followed was something I hadn't anticipated and, honestly, hadn't wanted. Someone had recorded Rachel's toast and my response at the wedding. Within hours, it was on social media. Within a day, it had gone viral. Sister exposes cheating at wedding was trending on multiple platforms. Millions of people watched Rachel humiliate me and then watched me reveal her secrets to a room full of her peers. The comments were brutal. People called her every name imaginable. They tracked down her social media accounts, her carefully curated Instagram full of perfect family photos, and flooded them with accusations and mockery. "How's your fake perfect life now? Does your husband know his son isn't his? Oh, wait. Karma is beautiful." Rachel's friends abandoned her one by one. Women she'd lunched with, traveled with, attended charity galas with. They all posted carefully worded statements about needing space and re-evaluating relationships. The country club where she played tennis revoked her membership. The marketing firm where she worked part-time let her go, citing cultural fit issues. Mark's family, the wealthy, connected family that had welcomed Rachel with open arms, turned on her with the fury of people who'd been made fools of. Mark's mother publicly stated at her book club that that woman had manipulated and deceived her son, and she would ensure everyone in their social circle knew what kind of person Rachel really was. When you've betrayed someone with that level of money and influence, they have the resources to make your life very, very difficult. Within a month, Rachel had lost everything: her marriage, her home, her job, her friends, her reputation, her entire carefully constructed life. She had to move back in with Dad and Diane, back to her childhood bedroom with Jason in tow. And Jason, sweet, innocent Jason, was the one I felt worst for in all of this. He was 5 years old, asking why Daddy didn't want to see him anymore, why they had to leave their big house, why Mommy cried all the time. Rachel had no answers for him that wouldn't make everything worse. I heard through family members that Rachel couldn't handle it. The stress of being a single mother with no support system, no income, and a destroyed reputation was more than she could bear. After 2 months of trying, she left Jason with Dad and Diane, saying she needed just a few weeks to get back on her feet, to find a job and an apartment. Those few weeks turned into months. Rachel would visit occasionally, but it was clear she couldn't cope with the reality of motherhood when she didn't have Mark's money and status to cushion her. She'd essentially abandoned her son, the innocent victim of her choices, because facing him meant facing everything she'd lost. Dad finally came to see me about 3 months after the wedding. David and I were settled into our new apartment, enjoying our still newlywed phase despite the family drama. When I opened the door and saw Dad standing there, looking 10 years older than he had at the wedding, I almost didn't let him in. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. "Please, Elena." We sat in the living room, an awkward silence stretching between us. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked. "I'm sorry for inviting Rachel when you asked me not to. I'm sorry for all the years I let her treat you the way she did. I'm sorry for making you feel like you always had to sacrifice for her. I was wrong, and I've been wrong for a very long time." I'd waited my whole life to hear those words, but now that they were here, they felt hollow. "Why are you sorry now? Because Rachel's life fell apart? Or because you finally see that you favored her over me for my entire childhood?" "Both," he admitted. "Watching what happened, watching her lose everything and seeing how she's handled it, I've realized the person I thought she was doesn't exist. I enabled her. I taught her that she could take what she wanted and never face consequences. And I taught you that your needs didn't matter. I failed both of you, but I failed you worse because at least Rachel got to feel loved." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I've been taking care of Jason. He asks about you sometimes. He barely remembers you, but he knows you're his aunt. He's a good kid, Elena. None of this is his fault." "I know it's not," I said quietly, "but that doesn't mean I can fix it." "I'm not asking you to fix it," Dad said. "I'm asking you to forgive me. Not for Rachel's sake, but for mine. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. On your terms this time, with boundaries. I'll respect whatever you decide." I looked at this man who'd chosen my sister over me again and again, and I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine remorse. It didn't erase the years of hurt, but it was something. "I'll think about it," I told him. "But Dad, if you're in my life, there are rules. I won't be at any family events where Rachel is present. I won't hear about how hard things are for her or be guilted into helping her. I won't be anyone's emotional support system except for the people who've actually supported me. And if you cross those boundaries, we're done. Permanently." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "Whatever you need. I mean it this time." Diane never apologized. She still believed I'd been cruel, that family should protect family no matter what, that I should have kept Rachel's secrets to preserve the family unit. I cut contact with her completely, and I have no regrets about that decision. Slowly, over the next 6 months, Dad and I rebuilt something. Not the relationship we'd had before. That was gone forever. But something new, something honest. He came over for dinner once a month. He respected my boundaries. He stopped making excuses for Rachel's behavior and started actually listening when I talked about my own life. Mark's relationship with Jason took a different path than anyone expected. After the initial shock and anger wore off, Mark realized something important. He'd spent 5 years loving Jason as his son. He'd been there for his first steps, his first words, his first day of kindergarten. Biology didn't erase those memories or that bond. It took therapy and time, but eventually Mark decided he wanted to remain in Jason's life. Not as a father, he couldn't do that, but as someone who cared about the child he'd raised. He set up a trust fund for Jason's education, visited him once a month, and made it clear that while he would never forgive Rachel, Jason deserved better than to lose everyone because of his mother's choices. Rachel is still trying to rebuild her life, from what I hear. She lives in a small apartment now, working retail to pay her legal debts to Mark. She sees Jason twice a month on supervised visits arranged by Dad. From what Dad tells me, she's a shadow of the person she used to be, the confidence and cruelty replaced by something quieter and smaller. I don't know if she's learned anything. I don't know if she feels genuine remorse or just regret that she got caught. And honestly, I don't care anymore. Her life isn't my responsibility, and her feelings aren't my problem. As for me, I'm thriving in ways I never thought possible. David and I just celebrated our first anniversary. I started taking online classes and finally finished my associate's degree. I got promoted at work. I have friends who value me, a husband who sees me, and a life that's entirely mine. The most important thing I learned from all of this is that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value you. For years, I thought being a good sister, a good daughter, meant accepting whatever treatment my family gave me. I thought love meant sacrifice and silence and always putting others first. But real love doesn't ask you to diminish yourself. Real family doesn't require you to carry their secrets and enable their cruelty. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for the people who've hurt you, is tell the truth and let everyone deal with the consequences of their own choices. I didn't destroy Rachel's life at my wedding. I revealed a truth she'd been hiding for 7 years. She destroyed her own life the moment she decided to betray both me and Mark, the moment she chose to build her happiness on a foundation of lies. And I finally chose myself. That's not cruelty. That's survival. If you've been the one who always sacrifices in your family, the one whose feelings don't seem to matter, the one who keeps the peace by swallowing your pain, please hear this. You don't owe anyone silence in the face of injustice. You don't owe anyone your complicity in their lies, and you absolutely don't owe anyone your continued presence in a relationship that diminishes you. Choose yourself. Set boundaries. Tell your truth, and let the people who've hurt you face what they've created without your protection. You deserve better than being someone's supporting character. You deserve to be the protagonist of your own story. And sometimes the only way to start that story is to stop telling someone else's lies.